Hi, I'm Lisa Fletcher, and you're now in the stream. Today, unbelievable levels of corruption in the diamond trade of the Central African Republic. We spend the next half hour with the man who went undercover to expose it like never before. Our digital producer, Malika Bilal, is here going through all your live feedback as it comes in, so make sure you tweet her using the hashtag AJStream. So, Malika, today we're talking about this new documentary surrounding corruption in the African diamond trade, and we've got the man behind the film as our main guest.
We do, and I watched The Ambassador over this weekend, and I was looking through our community's feedback, and one thing I was struck with is what they were calling the blurred line between being a journalist and being someone actually caught up in this corruption web. Yeah. And that's summed up here in this tweet from Misha, who says, Brügger is a good example of the contemporary unclear borders between journalism, activism, and being an artist. So for those of you at home, we'd like you to join the conversation as well. Tweet us using the hashtag AJStream.
Obviously, that's one of the issues we're going to get into today. Also with us via Google Plus Hangout are members of our online community. They're going to be joining our live discussion in just a few moments. But for those of you who want to take part in future Hangouts, be sure to add us to your circles. Just go to the link you see on your screen below, and you can be in the stream.
I'm Amanda Hess. I moved to Los Angeles so I would never have to deal with storms, and I'm in the stream.
How can a white European man turn himself into an African diplomat overnight? Danish filmmaker Mads Brügger did it by simply purchasing a black market Liberian diplomatic passport. And with hidden cameras to document his experience, Brügger set out to expose just how easy it is to take advantage of the corruption surrounding the African diamond trade in the Central African Republic. Now, you're probably wondering how he so easily got diplomatic credentials from Liberia. Take a look at this.
It's a story which begins in Portugal. Here on the outskirts of the town of Coimbra resides the Evans brothers, a second-generation British diplomatic title brokerage headed by the oldest brother, former Royal Marine Commando Colin Evans.
A white European with a reason to travel backwards and forwards out of Europe to a diamond-producing country in Africa and back again on a regular basis with diplomatic credentials, right, is a very, very, very valuable piece of kit. Yes.
And this valuable piece of kit, as he calls it, carries a $135,000 price tag, and it's exactly what the ambassador needed to expose one of the ways in which diamonds are smuggled out of struggling African countries. Brügger calls his controversial documentary style performance journalism, and he believes it is essential to uncovering the harsh reality missed by conventional journalists covering the deadly diamond trade. And so, with us live from Copenhagen to discuss his style of journalism as well as his role as the ambassador is director and filmmaker Mads Brügger himself. Mads, welcome to the stream.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
So going into this, you had to know that your methods would be controversial and that you were taking both personal and professional risks. What drove you to make this documentary?
Well, back in 2007, I stumbled upon a diplomatic title brokerage on the internet, and I thought if this is really possible, if you can purchase a diplomatic title, it would grant me unique access to the inner sanctuaries of a failed African state, which would, allow me to document and film what has never been filmed before.
So these so-called diplomatic.
So I decided to, it's a fairly classic, let's see what happens story. Once we set out to purchase a diplomatic title, going all the way, going all in, who will I meet? What will happen?
These diplomatic brokers, tell us a little bit more about them. Who are they? How big is this industry?
As far as I can tell, I have encountered, I would say, 10 brokerages on the internet. Some of them are clearly scammers, I should add, because this is a business which is shady and it attracts dodgy people. But several of them were, I would say, for real. I was offered diplomatic titles from Sierra Leone, from the mountain kingdom of Lesotho, and interestingly, I was also approached by brokerages who were working on behalf of Africans looking for representatives in Europe, such as becoming the consul of an African state in Warsaw, Poland, or even better, Monaco, which is very popular amongst African ministers these days.
So, Mads, I got to tell you, I was watching the film, and it was really a bit of a surreal experience for me. I mean, the people that you expose, it's like they're right out of Central. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear us, Mads? Okay, we're going to hold off just a second there while we clear up our audio with Mads. In the meantime, let's get in a few tweets from our community. I know everybody's had an opinion about this controversial documentary.
Well, definitely. There's one here from Ivan who says, if it's in the common public interest, at the end of the day, media serves that purpose to inform the public. Now, this is something that, of course, our community has been talking a lot about, whether or not this is the role of media or whether this is entertainment. But while we ponder that, and I know we're going to get a lot more tweets on that, I'd like to go to our Google Plus Hangout, where I'd like to talk to Aaron Leaf. Now, Aaron is a blogger at Africa is a Country, and he's speaking to us from New York. And Aaron, I know that you interviewed Mads, actually.
Yeah, I did, for Africa is a Country. And my question is, did he follow up with the people in the Central African Republic? Because we see he works with a lot of fixers, with a lot of diamond miners, and I'm interested to know what is their fate after he left, after the movies come out.
Mads, you want to go ahead and respond to that?
I'm sorry, I have been lost in translation because there were some technical problems and some sound problems, so I missed out what Aaron said.
The question was, what's been the follow-up in the CAR with after your film came out?
The fate of the people who were exposed.
Well, I would say 95% of the people in the film, including myself, are crooks, and more importantly, they are men of power and influence, and they should be able to fight and fend for themselves. Apart from that, I am dealing with some pygmies, and you also do see some functionaries in the film, but it's apparent throughout the film that the main culprits here are myself and the businessmen, the ministers, and the kingpins of the Central African Republic that I deal with. I don't know what the fallout of the film has been. I don't even know if they are aware of the film in the Central African Republic. Most of the men in the film are men who has a lot of problems. So I don't think this film is top of mind.
So, Mads, in watching the film, it was really quite a surreal experience because these people, these real people, actually come across more as characters, like right out of a Hollywood movie. You know, they're very dark and they're shady. What is it that you discovered? Is there something about Africa in particular that, you know, draws out these bizarre, corrupt kind of individuals, both from abroad and right out of the African governments?
No, the Central African Republic is the most extreme kind of Africa you can find. It is also the most forgotten country in, if not the world, then Africa. Just the fact that you and I are having a discussion about the Central African Republic is very exotic. Most people have never heard about the place. Hence, it is the ultimate hideaway. So it's a place which attracts, you know, shady and dodgy people. Furthermore, in the film, I am dressing in a way which clearly signifies what kind of fantasies, what kind of fetishisms drives me. And by dressing this way, I'm attracting men who subscribe to the same kind of fantasies.
Well, with that, let's go to Google Plus, where Tom has a question. Tom, go ahead. Tom, you might need to unmute your microphone.
Hi, Mads. I wanted to ask the question of this line between the fictional character that you create in revealing a non-fiction story or within a documentary. What prevents you from crossing or going into the area of, say, Sacha Baron Cohen with his characters?
Well, I would say, you know, as a boy, my teacher in high school, I had written an essay in Danish about Donald Duck, and she told me there's nothing wrong with Donald Duck, but there's something wrong with only Donald Duck. And I believe what makes this film different from the work of Sacha Baron Cohen, whom I admire a lot, he's enormously talented, is that I'm mixing it with with journalism basically.
The characters in your film have been called manipulative and brash, but many have asked the question, is there some sort of greater truth that these people are revealing to the viewer? Is there?
Well, the viewers should be the judges of that, I think. For me, it's a portrayal of the ultimate dog-eat-dog world, a country where the degree of corruption and the systemic dysfunctionality of the regime has reached epic proportions, to a level where everybody, even men of power, are living in paranoia night and day.
So Mads, in creating this documentary, you're exposing this very dark underbelly of diamond smuggling.
I've lost the sound again.
Okay.
Well, let's go to our Google Plus Hangout, actually, while we try to get his sound back. Jens, Jens, I know you have a question. Jens is a Danish Fulbrighter speaking to us from Oregon. Go ahead, Jens.
Oh, yeah, hi. Well, I wanted to ask Mads, he suggests in the movie that a lot of diplomats in Africa is acting the same way as he are. Maybe a little less obvious, but if Mads really think that is so, why?
So Jens is asking whether or not diplomats in Africa are acting the same way that they did in the movie.
While we're waiting to get Mads back on, let's go to Wade Williams. Wade is the news desk chief for Front Page Africa. She's coming to us from New York this afternoon as part of our Google Plus Hangout. Wade, tell us a little bit about how people have reacted to this documentary in Liberia.
Well, the reaction to the Mads Brügger documentary was actually controversial. There were people who felt that these guys were in government and using their positions, to perpetrate corruption, and there were others who couldn't believe that a journalist who come undercover, he might as well be as corrupt as those he might have hung out with in the process.
Mads, we're talking to one of our Google Plus Hangout guests about how the Liberian government reacted to your piece. And it seems from everything I read that they're much more concerned about you and quieting you than they are in dealing with the actual government corruption that you exposed. Was that your experience as well?
Yes, very much so. It's a classic case of killing the messenger, I think. They asked to have me arrested and extradited to Liberia, I believe. And as far as I can tell, investigating what has been going on inside the administration of Ellen Sirleaf Johnson, the president of Liberia, has not amounted to a whole lot. The spokesman for the former Minister of Foreign Affairs, who is now vice-chairing ECOWAS, released a press statement with 1,700 words in it, explaining how innocent Dr. Toka McIntosh is. And if you need 1,700 words to explain about the innocence of an individual, there's clearly something wrong.
Mads, I'm curious, you put yourself at risk, you put your crew at great risk doing that, not just risking your professional reputation, but actually risking your physical well-being. Throughout the documentary, there's one gentleman that suggests if you go about this incorrectly, you could end up in a ditch in Africa. Tell us a little bit about what it was really like making this documentary, how you felt. Were you scared? Were you nervous? You had on undercover camera equipment. You were surreptitiously recording people. What was that like for you emotionally every day going into that? Because you come off cool as a cucumber.
Well, I'm fairly good at dealing with prolonged periods of stress and paranoia. Life in the Central African Republic surely can be exciting. it's a place where there really isn't any reality principle. There's no causality there. So it's impossible to plan for what comes next. But once you have accepted this lack of reality principle, you start to relax in a strange kind of way, and also you have to try to enjoy the ride as best as possible, and being the consul of Liberia also has its fun moments.
But weren't you afraid of being found out? I mean, did anybody ask you this obvious question? What's a white European guy that sticks out like a sore thumb walking around in the Central African Republic asking these kinds of questions?
No, but this very obvious question, how come you are an extremely white guy, bordering on being a vampire, basically, is representing an African state to another African state? Nobody asked me this question, at one point I was approached by a head of army intelligence from the South African armed forces which are present in the Central African Republic. But he asked if I was the head of an intelligence agency, which he said he thought I was. And this leads me to believe that the system is very welcoming to characters such as the one I portray in the film. And what is most scary about this film is that you have to ask yourself what will happen when the real Mr. Kortzen, the character I play in the film, comes to town. Because I basically found out that within if not weeks then months, it was possible for me to almost rape and abuse an entire country if I wanted to do so.
How many Mr. Kortzens do you think? How many Mr. Kortzens do you think there really are, based on what you saw?
I have no idea really, but in September 2012, in Spain they picked up an honorary ambassador at large, claiming to be representing Liberia, a German individual called Dr. Anton, who was duping and scamming European investors for millions of dollars. So there are definitely some Mr. Kortzens around.
Well, Mads, of course, your character was a diplomat from Liberia. There's tweets here on that very topic. Chaudhry says, it's shameful on Liberia, and it goes to expose the scale of corruption that has destroyed Africa as a continent. But then on the other hand, you have one from Nafizi. He says, it's not about exposing corruption in Africa. How about the proceeds of corruption end up in banks in Europe and Africa? I want you to speak on that, but before you answer, there's one more tweet from Un Afropolitain who says, how can revelations in the ambassador be used to empower and inform African governments and authorities to prevent exploitation and corruption?
Well, to start with the last question, I would say that the ambassador, my film, can be viewed and watched as a very practical guide into the discourse and the practicalities of corruption. How is it conducted, which I think is should be required viewing for bureaucrats all over Africa, as well as Africans in general. Of course, all Africans are aware of the fact that Africa is the world's most corrupt region. But they seldom get to see how it is done in practical terms.
And on that note, actually in the film you have there's one person who's quoted as saying it wouldn't be if it weren't for France, and it wouldn't be for these former colonial leaders. Is that not the case?
Very much so. That is what is called in French and in the francophone former colonies in Africa, la Francafrique. Fric also meaning money, being slang for money. And there's this very much existing nexus of corruption that ties together France and its former colonies in Africa on a top level, all the way to the Élysée Palais in Paris. Sarkozy promised to deal with this. He did not. Some would argue it became even worse, and it intertwines African politics with French politics and very powerful and often sinister business interests.
So Mads, I want to ask you about the part of the documentary when you actually receive the diamonds. But before we do that, I want everyone to take a look at this short clip from your film.
Yes, this is the diamonds.
Yes.
The stones that you get yesterday.
Yes.
And another one
Yes.
should come tomorrow.
Tomorrow, another one?
Là, si on voit c'est avec lui qui n'a pas de papier, on va le frapper. Il va payer même 20, 50 millions ou 100 millions.
The issue of diamonds is very easy and it's very difficult.
Yes.
Easy if you have all the papers.
Yes.
The right paper, you can do everything you want.
So what we don't see in your expose is what happened to the diamonds. What did you end up doing with them?
The diamonds I would sell in the capital Bangui in the Central African Republic to some Syrian Armenian diamond dealers, having decided beforehand that I would not be smuggling diamonds myself. And the money I made on selling the diamonds I gave to some pygmies I was dealing with in the CAR in the Central African Republic. For incorporating a match factory, which I had been working, with them on bringing into a reality. It's not in the film because that would be very off character. In the film, I am not a goodwill ambassador, to say the least.
No doubt.
Well, one last tweet here, wrapping up what should be done in the future. Oluwu says, I think he should make a documentary on African currencies shipped into banks in Europe.
All right, we're going to talk more about this and a few other things with filmmaker and journalist Mads Brügger in just a few minutes in our online post show. But before we get there, we've got Malika with a few other story leads that we're following.
Activists around the world are marking the 5th of November, a day that's become synonymous with a 1605 plot to destroy the British Parliament. Wearing masks depicting the best-known member of the plot, Guy Fawkes, netizens are circulating pictures of themselves online. This from Stun, who tweets, "One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter." Well, the protest is backed in part by the group Anonymous, which has adopted the mask as its symbol to show resistance to police states and government surveillance, among other things. But activists in at least one country are barred from taking part. Canada has officially banned people from wearing masks during riots, the Wrap report tweets. It will work because rioters are very concerned about following rules. Nothing disguised about Harper's attempt to turn Canada into a police state. Masks at riots can now get you 10 years, writes William, referencing the Prime Minister. And Snapdragon sums up the sentiment. Canada lawmakers ban masks. Funny, they wear them all the time. Well, a tweeted ad in Malaysia announcing the sale of Indonesian maids has sparked tensions between the countries. Migrant rights activist Anis Hidayah spotted the ad tacked to a tree in Kuala Lumpur, photographed it, and posted it to Twitter. It offers a discount on fees of hiring a maid, but the word choice, Indonesian maids now on sale, has netizens angrily speaking out. As reported in the Jakarta Globe newspaper, the tweet caught the attention of Indonesian lawmakers in less than 24 hours. And in Malaysia, police are now investigating the maid agency. Well, as ever, we'd like to hear from you, so tweet us your thoughts on those stories using the hashtag AJStream. Lisa?
All right, once again, our thanks to Mads Brügger for joining us during our main show. He's going to be back again in the post show with us. It's streamed on aljazeera.com, so be sure to stick around for that. Now, on Tuesday, the U.S. election reaches the final stage as Americans head to the polling stations to decide who will be the next U.S. president. Al Jazeera will have full coverage all day long, and the stream will be there, capturing your reactions during the vote and as the results come in. And of course, we want to include your voice in our coverage. So be sure to go to stream.aljazeera.com/election 2012. We've got a simple way for you to record your own video comments for us for our broadcasts. So do that. And until then, we'll see you online. Welcome to the Stream's online post show. We're going to pick up our discussion where we left off. Our guest today is Danish journalist and filmmaker Mads Brügger. He just came out with a new documentary called The Ambassador. It's really exposing the dark side of honorary diplomacy and the diamond smuggling operations that happen under the nose of government in some African countries. Mads, you call your style of journalism performance journalism, and you say the traditional journalism is really missing something. What are conventional journalists missing?
Well, let me just correct you on that. The expression performative journalism was coined by the editor of a film magazine here in Copenhagen, Denmark. It is not something I came up with. And I don't mind conventional journalism. That was almost a Freudian slip. I don't mind conventional journalism at all. You know, most of the work I do as a journalist myself is fairly conventional, but there are places in the world where journalists can no longer operate by working in a conventional way. And such a place is, I would argue, the Central African Republic. So I thought it was fair to go in as posing as a consul instead. Because actually there are a lot of similarities between the world of diplomacy and the world of journalism. Apart from the fact that at the end of the day, diplomats have to cover things up and keep them in the closet.
True, but you know, as a journalist, we get very close to the lines in order to expose fraud and expose corruption and expose wrongdoing. But you know, one of the ethics of what we do is we do not cross that line. And you crossed the lines, and you actually created a bit of an ethical dilemma because you exposed a problem, but then you also became part of the problem. So I guess the question is, do the ends justify the means for you?
Clearly not, and I would say that, you know, of course there are means that I would not employ in order to, you know, reach whatever goals I may have. At the same time, you have to relate yourself to journalism about Africa as a genre and how Africa is portrayed and discussed and dealt with in especially Anglo-Saxon Western media. Recently, I read that Robert Mugabe had been appointed an ambassador of tourism by the United Nations, which is, I would say, quite bizarre. Nobody really, you know, discusses this, at least not in Denmark and most of the countries in the proximity to Denmark. Also, you would have a character such as Obiang, the strongman of Equatorial Guinea, who were appointed ceremonial leader of the African Union. Nobody took offense about that. You know, I would say, how can you deal with the African Union as a serious organization when they choose to be, you know, spearheaded on a ceremonial level by this, you know, Kim Jong-il of Africa. So, you know, at times where Africa journalism as a genre is dealing with a lot of difficulties, I think it's about time to, you know, try something else, basically. And the mere fact that we're having this discussion in a way proves my point, because if I had done a normal, conventional piece of journalism about neocolonialism and the systemic exploitation of the Central African Republic, I would definitely not be on your show today.
Well, Mads, there's a video comment here on the boundaries of journalism. Have a listen.
My name is Katarina. I live in South Africa. I'm curious about the ethics behind Brügger's filmmaking, how and if he draws a line between what is healthy criticism and just Eurocentric bullying, and thoughts about who's paying the price for the spectacular filmmaking. I'm thinking of The Guide in Red Chapel, for example. Thank you.
So she asked about who pays the price for this kind of filmmaking. I want to go to our Google Plus Hangout now before you answer that. Aaron has a question on similar lines. Go ahead, Aaron.
Yes.
Hi. I've got a question. This actually comes from a fellow Africa as a Country blogger, Sean Jacobs. He's wondering about what happened to the pygmies, or the Bayaka as they're known. He thinks you sacrifice the Bayaka for the larger moral goal of exposing corruption, and says that you ridiculed and infantilized them. Was that a conscious choice? Were you aware that's what you were doing?
Well, as a matter of fact, what I were doing with the pygmies in the film was meant as an homage, as the French would say, a tribute to the pygmies, by also exposing how they are treated in general, about black racism towards the pygmies. I would like to emphasize I have a lot of admiration and respect for the pygmies. I'm sorry for not using the political correct word for pygmies, which is a mistake. But it was not me, it was not exploitation on my behalf, and I'm sorry if it comes across as such.
I think it depends from which lens you're looking at it, because I think a lot of people got the subtle irony there as well. I'm curious, Mads, what kind of pushback you're getting. I've read that you're expecting at least one lawsuit from one of the passport brokers. I know there are some international film distributors who have been a bit alarmed by some of what they call racist depictions. What's the blowback?
Well, as you say, one of the passport brokers, actually the one who were brokering the title from Liberia, is very angry at me, and he has been busy slandering me and the film on the internet. He also tried to prevent the film from screening when it premiered in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and then of course the reaction from the president of Liberia, Ellen Sirleaf Johnson. But that's about it so far, at least what I know about.
Well, there's a tweet here from James who's a bit skeptical. He says there are still old white guys in charge of some African ministries, even in this day and age. The legacy of colonialism lives on. But Mads, there's also some questions kind of taking this full circle back on your funding and how that came about. Do you care to shed some light on that?
Yes, most of the funding came from the Danish Film Institute, which is a very progressive film institute.
Mads, any final thoughts before we wrap up the program today?
Well, I would like to say that I read an interview with the director of Darwin's Nightmare, a brilliant piece of documentary filmmaking about how the Victoria Lake was turned into an ecological disaster. And the fallout of that film was quite severe. I think several people were killed, and so it had some very drastic consequences. And the director said that if he had known so, he would not have made that film. Speaking as of now, I don't know what all the consequences of this film will be, but I would like to emphasize that of course no film is worth people getting killed, which I think is a very important thing to state.
Mads Brügger, Danish journalist, filmmaker, thank you so much for joining us today on the stream, and thanks to everyone in our Google Plus Hangout. Now on Tuesday, the U.S. elections reach the final stage as Americans head to the polling stations to decide who will be the next U.S. president. Al Jazeera is going to have full coverage all day long. The stream is going to be there, capturing your reactions during the vote and as the results come in. And we want to include your voice in our coverage. So go to stream.aljazeera.com/election 2012, /election 2012. We have a simple way for you to record your own video comments. And until then, we'll see you online.